Very cool.
Yeah, it's cute. Yes, we've talked to our phone people, so it doesn't automatically roll into voicemail. When you call your face, and it should go, we should have a couple people get that's if you have to call us. And you know what? Yeah, and that's how it's set up, but this year, like a month ago, Katrina had asked them to not have it on that day from 9 to 12. Please do not have it go until us. Hopefully it works. If not, you have my cell, you can call me. You can call me on my cell, you have it.
Won't be busy on that call, but
Yeah, it's gonna be in Monterey and it airs right to the cell service.
I just sent you it, so
Oh, perfect.
it can come through, but yeah.
Okay, I'm going to start with.
Hey everyone, good evening, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the meeting of the Board of Directors of the Pleasant Hill Recreation and Park District for February 23rd, 2023. The public may join this meeting in person or via Zoom or by telephone at the numbers indicated on our agenda. To comment orally in real time during the meeting, please fill out a speaker slip in person, use the Zoom raise hand function on your computer screen or the *9 function on your telephone. With that, let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. And Derek, would you make some of the pledges here, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Michelle, why do we have someone on the screen?
Because Larry is joining us for that agenda item for the contract, in case we have questions specifically for Larry.
Oh, okay, thank you. Welcome, Larry.
Good to be here.
Okay, let the roll call show that all directors are present this evening. Item number 4 is public comment. Are there any members of the audience who would like to make public comment this evening? Michelle or Susie, do we have any email public comments?
No, we have not received anything else.
Michelle, any raised hands?
We have no raised hands.
Close public comment then, and move to item number 5, which is a report from our general manager. Michelle?
Thank you, Chair Bernardo. Members of the board, I provided a written report in your packets. I wanted to just highlight a couple of things. One, because we've struggled with aquatics in the past, so I wanted to give a shout out to the aquatics team. They're having a strong showing this early in the spring. As you noticed this year, they've already had 143 swimmers enrolled. As compared to 79 last year, they ended up with just over 200, I think, last year. So they're having a strong spring. So very excited for that program and its strong showing. Just a reminder, it wasn't in the report because it was in the last one, but the Camp Expo is this Saturday, and so we start registration for both camp and summer swim lessons on the same day. And all eligible programs will get an automatic 10% discount for that day alone. And I wanted to put a shout out, in case you didn't see it either via email or on Facebook, to Katrina and Allie for their starring in the video promotion. They did a fantastic job. It's never easy talking to the camera. They made camp seem really fun, and I know that staff is ready for a groovy summer, so excited about that. And the last thing I just wanted to highlight and remind the board is that I will be out of the office beginning on March 2nd. I'll return on March 8th. I will have my cell phone, but Nicole Watson, our recreation superintendent, will be acting general manager while I'm on the islands. So that's where I'll be next week. So very excited. But with that, I'll take any questions.
Questions for Michelle on the managers? Michelle, I have one. I know that this is like the biggest day of the year in terms of registrations. And if anything goes wrong with our computers, we're going to be in a world of hurt. Do we have anyone standing by to be able to troubleshoot if we run into problems?
We do. We'll have multiple staff members manning phones. Susie, you are a little more aware of the registration process. Can you talk about that?
Yes, if we have any issues with Civic Rec, usually Katrina and Corey are key and staff members that handle anything wrong with Civic Rec. As far as I know, and the phones, we do have them turned off so they don't roll into voicemail. So if they call the community center, and it should be on our website, the phone number, and they can get staff working here at the reception desk
So that's what
to
we're
answer
going to
phone
be.
calls
Yeah.
and take registrations. And there'll be about 5 staff here that in person where they can come and register.
There's a considerable amount of revenue, but also public input on that day. And just have these fears, these nightmares, I guess, of something crashing on that night just because of our popularity and alternatives.
Sandy, I do have Corey on the line, and I believe she's intimately involved in registration as well. Corey, did you want to say something?
Yes, I logged into the meeting late, so I'm not sure I heard the whole question about the expo, but with Civic Rec, we do have the ability to notify them when we have high registration periods expected, and they will then allocate additional resources to our registration site, and we have done that for the expo.
So they have been notified then.
Yes,
Thank you, Corey.
you're welcome.
Any other questions for Michelle? Okay, we'll close that item again and move to item number 6, our consent calendar, which is to approve bills to be paid and the minutes of January 26th, 2023. Any comments on either of those consent items?
On the consent calendar.
Thank you. Any second?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar. All in favor? Aye. None opposed, 5-0 on the consent calendar approval. And do we take public comment on?
On the consent calendar? I do not have any public comment on the consent calendar.
Susie, anything on the consent calendar? I guess I should have done that before we took our
No
vote.
emails.
Okay, thank you. Item number 7, please remind me after we have our question period to ask for public comment here. To authorize the general manager to enter into a professional services contract with Tramutola LLC in an amount not to exceed $90,000 to provide consulting services to determine the feasibility of placing a tax measure on a future ballot and pre-electoral planning and public information services, and to authorize transfer of $150,000 from the general fund to capital improvement fund, as indicated in our materials. Michelle, we'll start with a report from you.
Yes, thank you, Chair Bonato, members of the board. As you recall, on February 9th, we had an initial discussion about entering into a contract based on a proposal from Larry Tramutola. And at that time, the board instructed staff to further negotiate with Larry's firm, specifically around the what we would call an off-ramp, a decision not to move forward, and as well as the term of the contract. So I went back and had a conversation with Larry about the timing, because if you recall, I wasn't sure about timing of phases, and it's kind of a blend, like everything kind of merges together. But it's going to take a couple of months for Larry and his team, from 2 to 3 months to gather all the information, to talk to the board about projects and really dive into what it is we want to find out from our voters as to what they would support. So that's going to be a couple of months, and then we'll have polling and we'll have reactions to polling. And so Larry and I had a conversation, and we talked that the initial kind of phase to where the board would really have the information to decide whether they wanted to move forward in earnest with a bond measure at this time would be about 5 months. So so my recommendation to the board tonight as you'll see, is that we enter into a contract for 9 months with Tramutola LLC with a minimum of 5 months. And so that's based on the amount of work that we really need to put into it so that we can make an honest assessment. And so there's some ramp up by Larry and his firm and some commitment. So I think that is my recommendation. There is a professional services contract. This contract is very similar to the contract that the district entered into with Tramutola in the first go around with Measure E, when we had this process at that time. The amount of the contract would not exceed $90,000. It would be a minimum of $50,000. So that 5 months would be a minimum of $50,000 for $10,000 each month, maximum of $90,000. There is no additional. So there was a question by the board about additional third-party services. Those would be separate contracts, and that at that time there would be separate decisions by the board as to the amount of those contracts. So tonight, what I'm asking the board to do is to authorize the general manager to enter into the contract with Tramutola for a maximum of 9 months and a minimum of 5 months. And in addition to that $90,000 anticipated expenditure, also authorize $60,000 to be held into a project fund so that we can then have that set aside for polling, artwork, marketing, anything else that comes up that we need in the future. And so I do have Larry here in case there's questions I can't answer specifically about the contract or about the process, but I appreciate Larry being here, and I also appreciate Larry's willingness to understand that the board didn't want to be locked in a process that that until we get more information, we're not sure we're going to move forward with entirely. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Well, I appreciate the effort not only to have Larry here, but to also to move this as along in Michelle, so that if we're able to make a decision this evening, we can not only meet the price ramifications of here, but also get this process rolling. So I really appreciate the collaboration here. But I'm sure we all have a number of questions still. Board, let's direct questions to Michelle, and if she needs to refer some to Larry, I think that would be the proper process to use here. So first of all, any questions before we get into discussion, or before we do a public comment discussion? This is our opportunity to ask questions of Michelle. Sandy?
Will we be able to, I know we'll be able to do some wordsmithing on this document?
So this is a document that was prepared by Larry, and so it's his services. So if there's something that you would like the district to change, you'd like me to change, then that would be up to the board. Okay. You're authorizing me to enter into this contract. So if there are terms or there are things of substance that you want to change, then now would be the time to have that discussion.
But it would be possible this evening to do a strike out,
Yes.
strike through,
Yes. And approve changes.
Prove it, yeah.
Well, if
If accepts that.
Yes, exactly.
So, yes.
Any other questions?
Not
Not at this point. Okay. Anyone else?
I have a
Derek?
follow-up question along those lines. Did MOSA review the contract?
She did not.
Okay, just curious if it required legal review.
No, it's in line with the other agreements that we have had, and I compared it to the previous agreement we had, and it's virtually the same except for the terms. So
I'll have a couple questions. Michelle, is it your understanding then that we won't get to polling until the summer? So that we're looking at probably the end of July before we need to make a decision about whether to proceed or not?
I believe so, but I think Larry, would the summer be the time you think we get to the polling, unless we did some initial polling?
A couple of things. First, thank you for allowing me to be here tonight. Last time I met with you, you were very patient with me with my cough. That night I was admitted to the hospital at Kaiser, turned out I had pneumonia. So over the last 3 weeks, I've been in recovery. And so this meeting is really the first really public meeting I've had since I met with you a few weeks ago. So my voice is still a little raw from the coughing that I've done in the last few weeks. But I also, this is a collaborative process. While we have experience and knowledge about how to move this forward, every situation is unique. Your situation is unique from what it was a number of years ago and is unique from any other district we might want to do. So while I'll frame things in phases or steps and all of that, you as a board need to know you're always in charge. We don't go through a series of steps without you being fully informed of what we're doing and understanding of what we're going. So, and that relates to the question of polling. We want to poll when we feel is the best time to poll. Now, what is the best time to poll? Well, we want to make sure it's not just a question of trying to figure out whether a ballot measure would pass or not. We want to use the poll to help guide us in terms of difficult and important decisions you as a board is going to make. Priority of projects, sequencing of projects. That all of that will come about through lots of conversations that we will have collectively, sometimes individually, you and I, but sometimes collectively, so that we can get the best possible poll possible. We also may want to consider that before we poll, we want to do some communication to the public, because as knowledgeable as you might be about all the things you want to do, the public clearly is not as aware of all those things. So we may want to do some communications prior to a poll. Those will be decisions we make collectively. But I also understand there's a certain amount of urgency. And I think the urgency was communicated, not as a sense of urgency, but it was communicated through Michelle to me because of the desire to have an off-ramp. Well, what if it's not feasible? What if it's not possible? And once I understood that, then it was a lot easier to say, okay, this is how we could work that out. So to have it give us enough time to be able to do our work, but also allow the board freedom to be able to pull the plug, as it were, if need be. So
I mean, I'm going to reframe here my question. So it doesn't appear, Michelle, then that we would be getting to polling or to deciding not to do this until the end of July.
At least
in your
yes.
as you kind of G2.
And we really have until November, November to make that decision. So,
Well, then I think just for all of our concerns, Michelle, I suspect that the reason for the question is because we didn't proceed in an earlier iteration, a very early stage, and there was a reason for that. So I think that's part of how we're trying to connect the cost and the commitment with the timeline. So anyway, any other questions for Michelle at this point?
Yeah, just a follow-up. It came up at the last meeting. We talked about the additional $60,000, and if that was ample enough, to do the things that we want to do, or ballpark. I mean, understand that we could always come back. Like it needs to be increased, but ballpark was that.
I believe ballpark that is that's a good starting amount. Obviously, if we want to do more, we have the unencumbered funds to do that. But I think an initial commitment of a total of $150,000 is a good commitment. I think the polling is about 25 to 30, and then $30,000 for additional communications. I think that's what.
Any other questions from Michelle on the proposed contract? Yes, please.
Just a question on the termination clause. It says that if it is terminated by the consultant, that the client shall pay the entire outstanding balance. Is that the $50,000 balance or the $90,000? It doesn't say.
no, I mean, if you terminate it after 5 months, that's what it would be. it would be the 50,000. If you terminate it after 6 months, it would be 60. It kind of, you know, my guess is that termination is going to only happen at one of two things. One is you're completely dissatisfied with me and you say, we got to go in a different direction. We hate this guy. That's never happened to me. It was not going to happen here, but that's a possibility. The second possibility is we poll and it says there is no chance at this point in time we can pass this. That may be the other opportunity for a withdrawal. I don't actually anticipate that happening either, given your election results from last time and given your needs and given your history. But those are two possibilities, and that's why we've allowed you to be able to pull the plug, so to speak, after a certain reasonable period of time if things are going south for one reason or another.
Is your concern is not written clearly enough about what the obligation would be if you terminated, say, in 4 months? Is it the full 90,000 or is it just to
it's a little vague. It's a little vague, yeah.
So Michelle, that's I think a legit comment.
In the termination in section 8 under the 4 laws.
Yeah, it's a little vague. It just says entire balance.
Yeah, so we need to have some clarity there.
Okay. And then, I have a question, sorry.
No, please.
And then for number 9, it says, so all of the work product, in terms of copyright, I think belongs to you, Larry, is that correct?
Yeah, you know, it's always in our contracts. And the reason for that is over the years, you know, we'd produce something and then you'd see somebody else using it somewhere else. Usually the best thing is for us to have mutual ownership of this stuff, whatever we produce. If you want to use it again, I have no problem with that. But what I'm trying to avoid is others, and I don't even know what that might be at this point in time, but we may develop some sort of piece of mail that's so spectacular that everybody in the state would want to copy it. Well, they shouldn't copy it unless they have approval from you and I, and that's what that covers.
Can you reword it so that it's mutual?
Yeah, we can work that out. That's something Michelle and I can work out.
One final questions. So the services that are listed says Part A is determine the feasibility of placing a tax measure. I'm assuming that placing a tax measure is us as a board placing a tax measure, sort of spitballing whether it would be other creative tax measures or other creative solutions that we could think about, like the initiative process. I think is this open enough?
Well, I mean, it's open enough that it can be any type of tax measure. So, you know, we're focusing on a geo bond, you know, but we could look at a personal tax, look at some other funding mechanism. But Larry's work is going to be specific, you know, as his expertise is on public funding via tax measures. And so whether that's geo bond or a parcel tax, you know, or something, you know. And those are pretty much our assessment, you know, the assessment district which we have, or a geo bond are pretty much our only 2 taxing options as a special mission. So
I just want to make sure it's flexible enough to have other options if you want to consider that.
Sounds like it is. Michelle, I had a question. This says that we would go for 5 months, but then renewals are for 3-month periods. And yet I thought I heard something about a month to month.
after 9 months. So so we're going, so our minimum is 5 months. Our maximum of this contract period is 9 months. That would get us through that November 30th. So after 5 months, let's say, you know, we get into the 6th month and we determine so basically we can end the contract any month between 5 and the end of the contract at 9. If we go further than 9 months, the additional term is 3 months at a time.
3 months again. It's after the 9 month.
After the 9 month period. Yeah.
All right, so I might as well give you my other minutes. Under services on the page 1 of the agreement. When you read that and then you go through A through G, it doesn't, the wording, I started to nitpick A, B, and C, and I no. You just need to add it says consultant shall, comma, with consultation from client and for the direct benefit of client, there should be another comma, then perform the following, colon. And that's, then all those words fit as far as review and assessment instead of changing all of those. So if you added that, that would work. And then the other thing, I was also looking at the termination clause. But I think also where it talks about the termination date on that same page, down below the asterisk, it says this contract can be terminated by client after 5 months. I think we need to add, and Sandy, without cause. That,
Oh, okay.
that just those two words would, I think make that a little better. So this contract can be terminated by client after 5 months without cause.
They usually say with or without.
Yeah.
Okay,
Larry, do you prefer that?
Yeah, with or without.
Okay, with or without.
Yeah, I don't know that. I'm sure that's what was intended, so.
Yeah.
Right. That's all I have.
Any other questions of Michelle about the contract proposal? Or about the transfer of funds that is part of this resolution? So, any questions of her? Then we'll open public comment on this subject. Any members of the public present wish to speak on it? No, seeing none.
Could I say, since I'm going to leave the meeting before I have a request, and that next week I want to meet with Michelle, and just to kind of, there's going to be an information dump, and I'm going to be asking a lot of questions, but I also want to schedule time with board members to be able to do that, and I'll work that through Michelle. I'm more than happy to do it in person. I'm more happy, which I think is actually better than Zoom or any other thing. But I want to make sure you're aware that I do want to meet with you to get your perspectives, make sure you understand the process we're going to go through, so that there is a comfort level all the way through it in terms of the process. But more importantly, really an information dump to me, so I can be as knowledgeable as you. I just wanted to put my advertisement in that I'd like to be able to do that within the next week or two to get that process started.
Okay, Larry, we need to get through them to approve the contract first.
Okay, once you do that, then that's what it is. And Michelle, I know you're going to be out from the 2nd to the 8th. So, but I just want to make sure that there is a sense of urgency, and I want to make sure I operate with that urgency as well.
I appreciate that, and also at least 4 of us on the board are aware of the meetings with consultant step. Derek, do you have any questions of Michelle about that process at all? Being unfamiliar with it?
No, it would seem like Michelle would contact us about availability, and then we would.
Indeed.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Larry. We were in public comment. I take that as a public comment, Larry. Susie, and any emails on this subject?
No, no.
Michelle, do we have raised hands?
No raised hands.
No raised hands. Okay, then I will close public comment and bring us back to the floor. Anyone like to start any conversation or discussion about the proposed contract and the transfer of funds?
No, I mean, I thought it was extremely good. I appreciate Larry coming on and Michelle having that background information before, because I think, when we originally saw the phases, to me, it was like, okay, I was looking at like three month or 4 month pods. And I think what's important, what I took from what Larry said today, which I think is very important, I think the process will dictate, and our consultant will dictate what the right time for the polling and future steps will be. And so this actually makes me feel better that it's a more fluid, process rather than a scripted, step 1, step 2, so to me, I mean, it could be that it goes the full 9 months before we get the, 8 months, 7 months before we get the polling, and, we work through that stuff. So I think that was helpful for me to understand. And it makes me feel a lot better, that it's gonna be a fluid process, and when we're ready, we're ready. And So anyways, I'm fully comfortable moving forward and excited about the opportunity to work with Larry and
Thank you for doing this. Others?
I concur. We're ready.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to ask some of the questions at our last meeting, so I feel content with where we're at.
With the content of the contract. Any observations or discussion?
Yeah,
Or we call for the vote?
yeah, I will have lots of comments as we go through the process. I'm pretty content with the contract and with the changes that we mentioned. I just wanted to be sure that it was flexible enough so that we can be creative and not sort of get locked in to what we did previously. So it sounds like there is some wiggle room to be creative within that process and find how the contract is.
To Bobby's comment, I also, as you all know, I'm very eager to go to our public and also don't want to misstep in that process. And so it was very good, for me to hear what Larry's recommendation is in terms of process and timing and flexibility and fluidity. And for that reason, I like the 5-month period because it creates a partnership that has that fluidity to it, so that our consultant can help us know how best and when best to do the steps that we're talking about. It's a large commitment of money, and I know that none of us wants to spend that money, without some sense of whether it's a good investment or not. And so I think this is a finely tuned contract along the lines of creating that long-term relationship, that 5-month bubble of time for us to work together. And I think the value in that is really commendable. So I like the way the contract is written. Michelle, in the resolution that we passed this evening, however, there have been some suggested changes, some grammatical changes to clarify, and also some maybe ambiguities that might be a little clearer. So in our resolution this evening, can it be understood that those things would be either handwritten in, or Larry would provide a follow-up contract before the deadline that he's proposing, so that we can get in contract by the end of
Yes, so your motion could state that you authorize the general manager to enter into the professional services contract with the changes noted. And then I have those noted, and they were they will be in the minutes. So.
All right. Any further discussion on this? Do we have any further? We would like to make a motion. Robbie?
go ahead and move that we authorize the general manager to enter into a professional services contract with Tramutola LLC in an amount not to exceed $90,000 to provide consulting services, determine the feasibility of placing a tax measure on a future ballot, and pre-electoral planning and public information services, and authorize transfer of $150,000 from the general fund to the capital improvement fund with the proposed changes noted during this discussion this evening.
Second. And seconded by Vice Chair Vincent. All in favor? Aye. 5-0. Thank you. Thank you all for the unity. Larry, we look forward to working with you very, very much.
Look forward to meeting you again in person.
Thank you. Yeah, your face is like 6 feet tall here. So.
I could move the computer farther away, I guess. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to item number 8, authorize a mid-year cost of living adjustment for eligible employee, 5% cost of living adjustment for eligible employees effective January 1, 2023, an additional cost of $102,487,000 for fiscal year 2022-2023, as outlined in an attachment. We will start with deferring to Michelle for a report. Just tell you I'm having real heartburn. So please give us a good report.
So thank you, Chair Bonato. I know that we just kind of a quick overview during the budget process. We looked at salary adjustments based on the salary survey. We made those. We did not include a COLA at that time, and due to the fact that based on our projections, I wasn't comfortable recommending any COLA increase because I wasn't sure coming out of COVID what our revenues were going to be. Last year we ended with a $2 million surplus. $1 million of that was COVID funds that we moved rightfully so to the capital improvement project fund, but and then we had an additional $1 million in revenue, and then we moved some of that those additional dollars also to the capital fund. But we ended the year well, but not knowing where we were going to be this budget year, the board asked me to come back at mid-year to look at potential COLA for the employees so that we do not fall behind. There was a large, the inflation has been significant. Cost of living last year, the CPI was close to 8% in the summer. So I looked at the mid-year numbers, which we had just compiled, and looked at where we were year to date. And so looking at where we are year to date, we are in a surplus year to date at mid-year. We traditionally are not in a surplus year to date in mid-year. We're usually tracking a little behind, so that was good news. And so looking at all of those factors, looking at the revenue that's already committed, I am and speaking with my finance manager, we are confident that we're going to once again meet and exceed our budget. And so looking at a COLA for half of the year, we thought made sense. I looked at a variety of amounts, and so so when you look at the numbers, I'm recommending 5% COLA for all employees that are eligible. Those are full-time employees and permanent part-time B employees, as we call them. And so if you look at that increase, the increase for half of a year is $100,000. So that is for all of those employees. The full year cost would be $204,000, but we're only going January 1 to June 30. And so and the rationale, I looked at the CPI, which I attached for October and December, and the range was between 6.4% and 4.6%. And so the 5% is right in the middle of that. We can afford it, and so I thought that that would be reasonable. The additional expenditures for personnel across our budget is an additional 1%. So it's 1% of our budget would be personnel costs versus the original budget amount. So which puts us in line with the other agencies that we compare ourselves to. We're about right in the middle, with the lowest being LARPD at almost 58%, and the highest being Martinez at almost 73% of their personnel budget. I did have a great conversation with the Budget and Finance Committee. They asked some great questions. I appreciated the question about other agencies and their percentages, as well as looking at the range, including the 4%, 4% on the options as well. And so I'm recommending, because I believe I think the board knows me well enough by now, at least those that have been on the board, that I am a conservative budget manager, and so I err on the side of caution, and so I think this is the right time. We have the funds, and since we were unable to do the bonus structure that I had recommended, I think it's a good. It would be good for employee morale as well, since we ended the year last year with such a good surplus. There was a question by the budget committee about, well, what does this do to future COLAs? I don't know. We may be giving them 5% now, and then when we get into our budget, we may be going, well, you're at 5, and you got that 5%, so we might be doing 1 or 2, or we might not do anything, right? So all I can do is look at the numbers that we have now, and I'm confident in that. And then, we'll deal with the next budget year when we meet with the budget committee in May. I don't know if Sandy, if you had anything as the budget chair that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I would concur. You summarized what we talked about. We did have a very good and not very short discussion. It was something that we talked about during the period of time of 45 minutes. We discussed this whole thing because we had the numbers. Secretary Tran had asked for some of the additional numbers that Michelle provided, which was very helpful. And we also discussed whether spending this money what would the public think about us spending this money at this point in time? Would that do anything when we're going to go out and potentially talk about a bond measure? I think it's a valid question. I don't think, if I look at it from a neutral standpoint as a member of the public, I would rather see at this point in time, the district has the funds, they've been good stewards of the finances, and I am concerned about staff and how they deal with inflation and how they're dealing with the costs that seem to be rising and not going down very much when they go into the store, when they go to the gas station, or whatever it is that impacts their daily lives. So I'm in support of the 5%. Michelle actually started with 3%, 5, and 6, and we asked her to put the 4% column in instead of 3, because we weren't going to go with 3, but the 5, when we discussed that was a reasonable approach to go, that then we had the discussion about, well, what will happen in July? Will we recommend another 5%, or will we recommend a 1.5% or a 0.5%? We just don't know yet. But I'd rather, given what the staff has done over the past couple of years, I would rather, since we have the funds and it looks like our budget projections are doing very well, I would rather give it to them now for the 6 months, the first 6 months of 2023, than not give it to them and then get in the middle of the summer and say, oh, gee, we might not be able to even do 1%. But I don't think that's going to happen. But I'd rather give that to them now for something that will at least help them in the never-ending or long battle to deal with what's happening with inflation on everyday lives right now.
Any questions of Michelle or Sandy or Greg, who serve on our budget committee, before we call for public comment? Michelle, do these figures include the increased premium for workers' comp and the health PERS increase as well? And do these reflect? You mentioned $2 million of surplus. I don't remember $2 million of surplus. I remember $1 million plus coming from the state as COVID infill funds. I don't remember $2 million.
We ended last year with $2 million in the operating budget. We moved the 1.3 plus some additional. So our final operating budget, didn't show that kind of surplus, but we ended the year with $2 million.
That was because we used our capital improvement money, capital improvement items. The opposite actually.
We did the year before, but yeah, so I mean we did end the year in $2 million surplus. The books don't look that way because we took some money and moved it, but that is what we ended.
Again, it was because we paid for capital items. And traditionally, we would have taken them out of operating and then replaced and then infilled the money from capital improvement funds. We didn't do that last year. And so there was, I think we have to understand that we have to kind of adjust our thinking about where those, those budget surpluses are. Sorry, now into discussion. I'm supposed to ask a question, not just lecture. But all right, I will have more comments when we get to discussion. But thank you for your I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions? No. Okay, we'll go to public comment. Any public comment from members of the audience? Public. Susie, any emails?
No emails.
Michelle, raise your hand.
No raised hands.
Okay, we'll close public comment and bring that back to the board. Well, since I'm the one that's kind of raised a question, I will lead off with some concerns I have. I've been on this board since 2009, and I've never felt comfortable with a surplus being a surplus that we can count on in the next year. Lots of things can happen. We experience some inflation right now. We could have a recession. We could, for one reason or another, our income might not be what it was before. There's so many things that can happen. These numbers are just not numbers that, in my experience, we have sustained over time. They have, I will admit, been increasing. And I think it's a tribute to staff to the fact that we have not only been generating a lot more revenue since COVID from the use of buildings like this and our program and revenues, across the board, it has been increasing. I don't quite understand, though, where all of the revenue is coming from in these added categories in order to be able to have a comfort level that is sustainable. Staff is telling it is so, but I have these concerns that these are numbers that we're not used to. We're adding a permanent $200,000 increase to our budget every year on the assumption that we will be able to afford it. And I just am uncomfortable. I know I stood up at the beginning of my term, if you will, and said and committed to staff to paying them fairly. But I've also mentioned, like a 0.5 COLA, we could afford that, or a 1% COLA, we could afford that. But to do a 5% on top of what is essentially a 5% adjustment in our steps is an awful lot of increase over 1 year, and a belief that it will be sustainable without us having to do layoffs or other things in the future that we might need to do. To me, we're just not a district that can afford to do this, that is rich enough to do this. And I also respectfully disagree that the public is not going to understand why we're coming to them for millions of dollars worth of monies when we have budgets and surpluses of the types that we're talking about here. We have other obligations. Should 67% of that go toward our staffing? I'm not sure that's the right number for a district like ours. I'd be more comfortable, I think, being in the lower 60s or even at 60% compared with other districts. I'm not convinced that comparing the budgets of cities with the budgets of a recreation and park district is where we ought to be doing the comparisons. With all due respect, I appreciate the question, but I don't know that the input that we got was really reflective of apples to apples. I'm just not sure of that. The other thing that I'm really concerned about is we've had no discussion as a board about our unfunded pension liability. We have a number that gets posted every year in our audit. But I asked Michelle, a couple of months ago about what's going to happen. There's about a 2-year lag, and Sandy, you probably aware of this too. There's about a 2-year lag when the market goes up. There's about a 2-year lag before we begin to see the effect of that our obligations toward our pension fund are supplemented or reduced because the stock market is doing so well, and the monies that CalPERS has invested are doing well. Well, we had a significant downturn in the market. And it's going to be another year or two before we see the impact on that, on what we have to pay out of pocket with respect to our share of the pension monies. The employees are capped at 7%. The rest is up to us. And the rest becomes unfunded pension liability if we can't afford to pay it. Or if the state has determined that we can put it in a pot and set it aside and figure out later how to pay for it. We don't have a plan for that. We don't have any plan for that. So I'm concerned about all those things. I'm concerned about this being too rich an increase. I'd be far more comfortable with a 2%, and then let's see what we can do with our budget upcoming to come up, to see what staff brings us back. I realized that there was an effort made to reward our employees with a COVID bonus. That didn't turn out to be lawful, and so we instead were recommended to do about the 5% step adjustment, which will affect every employee. But this just strikes me as being too much. It's more than I feel has been demonstrated to me is going to be sustainable for us without having to do layoffs or doing other kinds of cuts that I would frankly not support. And so I would like us to get more information from staff before we make a decision here, or certainly reduce this number somewhat and see what staff comes back with in terms of the upcoming budget.
Chairman Donovan, could I make a correction on the pension?
Yes, please do.
Because the district and the employees have a share. The district doesn't pay any portion of the employee share. So the Pepper employees, which are those that were hired after the Pension Reform Act was enacted, that is a stagnant set amount. So we have no pension liability on any of those employees. So myself and new employees that have come in that aren't in the classic PERS. Now, so there's no pension liability. All of our pension liability is in our classic PERS employees. So those are the employees that have been here for a very long time. The rate adjusts by PERS, but it adjusts on the employee side and the employer side, but we don't pay any of the employee side. So it's currently 10.65% on those classic employees. The district pays 10.65% and the employee pays 10.65%. So as PERS adjusts that and goes up, we pay the district portion, but we don't pay the employee portion. There was at one point in time, a long time ago, but the district fixed that issue. So I need to correct that. And currently our unfunded liability, so we are at 80% funded in our pension per PERS, looking at our thing, we're at 80%. That is the goal and the mark that you want to hit is 80%. We're currently at 80%. It goes up and down depending on how much money was paid in, who retired, what as you mentioned, the stock market. So yes, those are going to be up and down. But PERS has given us what they believe are UAL, as they call it, which is our lump sum into our unfunded liability that we pay every July, what that's going to be for the next 30 years. And so, so we have a good idea of what that is going to be. And as more people retire and we replace them with Pepper employees, our liability goes down. And, so we're not as dire in the unfunded liability as others, because they have things like post-employment benefits. They have agreements with employees where they pay a portion of the employee share. The district used to do that. We do not do that anymore. We only pay the district share. So I just wanted to make that clear that we're not paying any of the employee share.
I think it would be great to have a presentation with some documentation, both from CalPERS as well as perhaps from our auditor, to explain just what our liability is, what that number is, and when it's going to come due. And also what the effect of the PEPRA versus the full CalPERS employees is, so that we can see how our district is going more toward the former than the latter. But I'm also aware that we've done some significant payouts to retiring employees. And so that it's not free. It's not free. When those people retire, there are obligations that we have bargained for. And that's money that comes out of the district.
Well,
Having an entire discussion about.
Yeah, and we can, and I will put that on a future, we will have that conversation. I think that would be a good educational conversation.
Well, I thank you all for hearing me out. Those are my concerns.
Shall we just, put these percentages that I had asked about hard numbers, I think, I went to go with, so our last audit, hard numbers was around 5 million unfunded liability.
Yeah, and if you, but you base it on the percentage of it being funded is what we look at. But yes, it's about 5 million. And 3 years ago, it was three years ago, it was like probably 3 million. And then, it goes up and down depending on, on the market and who's retired, who hasn't. We did some good work and, we had, a number of employees retire early that we didn't give golden handshakes to, that we got them off the books, probably about 5 to, 7 years earlier than we would have. So they retired earlier, and we also saved quite a bit of salary as well, so.
Yeah, the city actually took out a loan that we wanted to pay down, not off, but pay down its pension liability. And it has since retired that loan. So they did some analysis, the kind that I would like to see for us, about just what is the best way for us to handle it. Anyway.
My comment.
Please.
I'll have some additional comments, but I wanted to respond as well. That I appreciate what you brought up, and those are actually the 3 questions I had brought up that may only be 45 minutes long. Was how is this going to affect our unfunded pension liability? Because depending on costs, and then added to that, what can we afford given that our operating budget sort of fluctuates between $8-10 million a year, and it's kind of been that way. Sounds like I went back and looked, but it's kind of been in that range. So at some point, we just can't keep giving more and more because our operating budget hasn't expanded all that much. So there's going to be some cap, whatever that number may be, but there's going to be some cap that we're going to reach at some point in time. And then the final question that I asked Simmers was, how would this be perceived? And I think it's still an important question from the public. We're going out to ask them for millions of dollars more. And I think that's still an unanswered question because I think that's an important one to ask. To be honest, I wasn't quite comfortable with 5%. We had a lot of discussion. I was sitting at 4%. And I had asked for these numbers, comparisons to other agencies as sort of a way, what percentage of our total operating budget do we feel comfortable with? Do we throw out a number around 60% maybe? I was kind of comfortable around the 64-ish%. It seemed to be, it's a little bit higher than, is that a little more?
Yeah.
A little more, a little bit lower than East Bay and kind of in between the cities. So it's 54% was kind of where I was sitting at. And that to me was sort of, oh, that's probably comfortable-ish in terms of sort of sitting in our total operating budget, some percentage that we're not out of bounds in terms of local governments, right? We're not 80% of our budget, not 70% of our budget. We're sort of in the midst or the middle of other agencies. And so if you had to throw out what number, it sounds like we're going to be all in favor of a COLA, whether it's 5%, 1%, 3%. And I think we are recognizing, I don't think that's the argument, we're recognizing that there has to be some COLA. I think the discussion for tonight is, what is that number that we all feel comfortable with? So I do appreciate maybe a discussion on what is that number, because I'm probably more in favor of a 4%-ish range rather than 5%. I don't know if 0.5% or 1%. I think that might be a bit low.
Well, in part, that's because we did nearly a 5% adjustment in our current budget.
Yeah.
So we're already,
Yeah.
we've already adjusted
Yeah,
salaries,
right.
yeah.
We did bring
What
that
I'd
up
say
too.
is this, so this compounded bonus.
That's not sort of like 5, sounded reasonable, 5 for it, and maybe not much at all in July. Because of what it looks like.
We don't know what.
We don't know what it looks like, but that to me sort of says, well, we're keeping an eye on things, we're lowering it as we need to. That's why I sort of thought kind of 5 and 5, so it seemed like a lot all at one time. Those are my comments.
Others.
Well, it's my first time having to kind of, get acclimated with this kind of conversation, and I wasn't aware of, what prior COLA increases had occurred with the district. I duly understand your concerns about, the percentage involved here, and that being kind of a permanent increase over time and is sustainable. I kind of feel, coming from in our industry where we've seen the cost of inflation is something that everybody's contending with. It's not that anybody's immune from the effects of inflation, that it's in some way what we have to do in order to keep pace with the current economics that we're faced with. I also had some thoughts about the public perception. To your comment, what would it look like for the public when we're trying to solicit interest in going out for a bond measure, as well as then levying a COLA of 5% to employees. And I think about what we're asking the staff to do, especially with the decision tonight, to enter into an agreement to pursue a bond, and the commitment that's involved as we do that, staff commitment, everybody's involved to make that a success. And I wouldn't want to make it seem as though we're not all invested in that commitment together by not demonstrating some amount of increase in living expense or wages, or that type of consideration that we have going forward for what we're going to be. We don't have new operating expenses. We don't know what new revenues we will have in the future, but with potential bond measure could open up a lot of opportunities for those to increase. Maybe in having more staff and having additional revenue. So I'm in favor of COLA, and I think it's due after having been through a couple of years of pandemic when everybody was very cautious about what the future held. So I like I said, I haven't been along enough to understand what had been done previously, but in this situation, I think that the numbers would suggest that COLA is worth it, as well as something that would be favorable, and we can look at in July when the budget comes as to whether or not there are any subsequent increases. But at this time, I don't see any disagreements with the numbers that have been proposed.
I would just start off by complimenting Derek. Watch your comments and questions over the your first 5 meetings. I wasn't at that point until 2 years, man. That's impressive. And jump in on some big items like this. Kudos to you. And I feel really like I was woefully underrepresenting the district. But yeah, I was on this board with Sandy, and there were times when we had to make really tough decisions. We didn't have these budgets, where we had a surplus. We dealt with layoffs, we dealt with cutbacks, we dealt with trying to, keep the lights on in a lot of, different capacities, at the same time trying to figure out, dealing with the, employee share of the, pension liability, where we phase that in over a couple of years to ease the burden at a terrible time. And then we went through the reform to the pension issues where we got new employees, and it was, trying to attract employees coming in under a different, pension plan. So there's so much of this that it's a balancing act, and it's managing the ability for the district's long-term financial feasibility while also maintaining the reason that we, have that feasibility, which are the people that make up the district. So I see, Sandy, I understand your question 100%, and I think that they were all great questions. I do think that there needs to be, I think it would be a good discussion to have on, some clarity on the unfunded pension liability. I also think that, I tend to think I think where Derek was landing, where in the event we go forward with a bond measure, the district, talking about it, obviously it is of the utmost importance of what how the public feels and perceives what we're doing as a district, and our ability to continue to offer the high product and high quality services that we provide. And I think that, a big reason, I know we all agree that the reason we're able to provide that high quality product and service to the people of the district is because of the people that we have in the district. And the economic situation in the last 12 to 18 months has been substantial. There has been quite an increase in inflation. There's also the possibility that there could be a recession, and I tend to believe there will be. So I do share those concerns. I also put a lot of faith in our general manager and our finance team, that they put us in a position that they have all the same goals that we have, and we all sat in the same room and decided those goals. And so I think I agree with everybody that I do believe there needs to be something a COLA going forward. I was comfortable. I thought that the staff report, I wanted to mention that, I thought it was one of the better staff reports that I've seen. The information, it was clear to me that the Budget and Finance Committee vetted this information, asked great questions. I love the fact that, and I'm going to get to a question I have here, just Secretary Tran, maybe in the Finance Committee, was the comment was made about the percentage of expenditures and how, currently on our, says our adopted, one says we're at 61.46, and then if you go up in here, it says district's adopted budget had 64.6, and it's
City of Pleasant Hill.
Yeah, that's City of Pleasant Hill, so we're not in that, so.
Oh, I got you.
Yeah, this is the city, so these are the agencies that
I got you.
we have identified as our like agencies for our salary comparisons.
Gotcha. Okay, so we're at 64.6, and so Secretary Tran, I think in your comments you mentioned that you were comfortable with a 4% COLA, because, and I think your rationale was that landed us in that 64% range. Okay. So I'm cool with that. Like, if you're cool with that, I'm cool with that. I know that there's still questions, and I want to be respectful of Chair Bernardo, and she's been doing this longer and better than I have. And so I'm wondering, if there's a way that we get to that. I don't know where everybody else is, but I'm assuming based on your comments that you're okay with that. I don't know where you're at, but going forward, I don't know, is there a way that we could get you, or is there more information that's needed to get you a comfort level to feel that? Because I've done this long enough to know that I don't want to take a vote tonight knowing that if there's a chance to get you to that point, because I respect a no vote, and I know that doesn't mean you don't support staff. But I'm just curious if there is a way through additional information or comfort level. Maybe that information makes us uncomfortable about our current position. I don't know. But maybe that's a question to you, Chair Bernardo.
Well, first of all, absolutely in favor of the COLA, and to stress that we weren't able to get them. It's the compounding nature of what we did, which every 3 years we do a comparison. And that was the result of the comparisons that we do in order to make sure that we're paying our people competitively. And that was the adjustment that we made there. But it was explained to us, it was we could do a COLA, we could do this, and let's do this. And that was kind of how it was presented. We can't afford a COLA. Or we didn't really know, we couldn't project enough to know. And now 6 months later, it seems like, yes, we can project enough to know that going into the future, we can bear this additional $200,000, nugget a year. And I'm just not comfortable, not persuaded. So it's the combination. I'm probably, if I had to throw out a number, probably at about 2.5%, and let's wait and see what staff comes back with in next year's budget. That's probably about it. But that's only half of it. So you may not be able to get me to a point where I'm more comfortable with the number. Adding $100,000, that's a lot. That is a lot for me. Adding 100,000 to know that would be sustainable. Excuse me. But I'm more comfortable at $100,000 moving into having that at a permanent level, and then figuring out as budgets are proposed for the upcoming year, where we're at. Adding $204,000 permanently, it's beyond my comfort.
Let me ask you a question on that, and maybe that's a good question through you to the general manager, is that if it was I'm trying to get, if you did 2.5 now and then said, came back with the goal of doing it 1.5, later 2.5, 2.5 to get 40 into 5, that would be under the plan that waiting until June, July allows us to see what our end of year budget is and what we're projecting cost wise for next year. Is that correct? Would that be correct? So maybe a question would be, based on what you all know right now, are you envisioning an issue making having a balanced budget based on this, an increase to the current proposed, if it was say 4 or 5%?
I believe we will have a balanced, we'll meet budget this year, and I'm prepared to, because I looked at that as well. Tramutola is okay. Well, I'm adding $200,000 annually, so so I need to be comfortable with that moving forward as well. But I will be the first one to tell employees that we might not have a COLA in July. So so if we're going to have a large COLA now, which gets them the money in their pockets now, in July we might just be status quo, because that is what our budget's going to allow. And so so I am looking at that as, okay, I know I can sustain that $200,000. I'm pretty confident in that moving forward, based on what I'm looking at, what our surpluses is, what our what our property tax dollars have come in at in half the year, what money that we have committed that is in deferred revenue that is yet to be booked into revenue. Those are all monies that people have already paid us, for facility rentals, upcoming programs that all sit in an account that don't go into our revenue until that program happens, right? So, so when I look at all of those things, I am comfortable. I'm not comfortable with saying, well, if you do a 5%, I do a 5% now, I'm also going to look at a COLA in July. Most likely, might be, okay, well, maybe we do 1%, maybe we don't do anything again. So
to that point, because I think where I'm at is, what is there a comfort level with doing? What would your argument be for or against doing a, or like say against, because the recommendation is 5 right now, doing 2.5, 3 right now, and then 2.5, 3 in July.
In July. I mean, yeah. I mean, if the board is comfortable with that, we can definitely do that. I was erring on the side of giving the employees the amount now, because they'll have that all the way through and then into July. And so, so that is money in their pocket at this point in time. And so, but, I would also support, I'd support anything for our employees. So I would support a, 2.5, which is, $100,000, moving forward, and then we can look at a COLA with the budget year. But with a 5%, I'll tell the board, I most likely will not look at a large, if any, COLA in the upcoming budget, because I can. So if the board would prefer to look at, hey, let's give the employees half of it now, and then we can do something in the next budget year, I would support that, and I can see that argument.
3% is 120,000.
2% is 122.
For the full year.
So the argument part of the argument that I was comfortable with, I took from my time in the personnel committee, really spending quite a bit of time revamping that salary structure, or at least the statement on how we're going to approach salaries for the staff. And so I wanted to be sure that the statement had in there that it was fair and equitable. This goes to the right people, that it was transparent, because as a board member, I have to explain it right here to the community.
To the public.
Yeah. So I spent a lot of time making it very clear. These are the numbers. This is what exactly it is. I hated that formula that we had in the prior personnel policy. I couldn't explain it to anybody. But this I can explain. There's numbers in there. There's CPI. There's numbers. I listed on the table. What percentage are we operating at? I can actually state this is what we're spending. This is how we compare. So it's transparent. And then the final thing, which I think we're debating, is it fiscally wise to do it now. And I think I'm on the side of yes, it's part of the way to do it now. And partly because if you look at the employment landscape, recruitment and retention is the big R&R is the big word nowadays. I'm having trouble in my own sort of the world, including people, and I'm throwing in like 5% recruitment bonuses. You sign here, I'll get you 5% type of thing, or 10% if you stay on for 3 years. My docs, I'm going up to like $30,000 recruitment bonuses because I need them. But it's easier to retain people than recruit people, and so if there's a number out there that ensures that the staff that we have, we all agree that staff are great here, that retains them and doesn't lose them, then I'm all for that. And I think we can make an argument, I can make an argument, at least in my mind, that everybody's having trouble getting people. We needed to retain people. We did it in a way that's transparent, easy to explain. We can do this. Now, in the finance committee meeting, I was a little bit skeptical that we could do anything in July, really. And so we're going to do something. I think we should just do it now. And then not promise the July thing. That it may not happen. It's probably not going to happen if the downturn is what everybody predicts. But we can do it now. So I'm comfortable with 4, although I can be persuaded to go to 3 if that's what you're negotiating here. But I divided metaphor too. I think if we're going to go ask the public for money, to have sort of an agreement in the resolution that we can all agree to, we can all feel comfortable, that it's a much more powerful message than. And so if there is some give and take that we have to do, then there's some give and take that we have to do. But I would like to get to some number that we can also agree to.
I'm reacting positively to your retention issue. And it's why we do the salary comps every 3 years to make sure that we're properly paying people. The question that you raised for me though was you're not sure that come July we'll be able to do more. And if we're not sure now that in July we'll be able to do more, then how can I approve $200,000 permanent increase in our budget at 5%? So
Well, I was saying that,
You threw me a little bit there.
yeah, I was saying that we just do 4%, and then there was talk, can we talk about more after that? Or 5%, whatever it is. I don't think we can. In my mind. Now, we're asking, like, what we say, can we split 2.5%, 1.5%? We could probably, I think, probably do that pretty easily. But if we're talking these small, like 2%, 1%, in my mind, they just lump them together and just get all in one shot. But I don't actually think we can get much more than 4%, or sort of iffy on 5% for like the next year, couple of years. That's sort of what I feel, but we can do 4.
We don't know what inflation's. I mean, we do it.
Well, I don't know either, but
I mean,
we're getting
make
close.
what we plan.
Yeah, but I know we're getting, I was hoping it was 54%, but if you go up higher, our operating budget, like I said, we're almost capped off in a way, right? Until we get some new facilities or services or whatever it is that we can generate more. I haven't seen a budget for $11 million, 12, right?
No, I mean, we've been steadily growing. It was,
Yeah.
like close to 7, 8 when I got here,
Yeah.
so, and then we had a couple of COVID years that
Yeah.
threw everything out.
Fluctuates a
So,
little bit.
but the
We were only gonna be able to afford 11 months out of the year, remember?
right, and so, but the, property values are going up in town and, but we're definitely gonna see some slowing on that, but, so.
It would take a lot to sort of push it even more.
Yeah, it's gonna take a lot,
Yeah.
I mean, it would take more
A lot
to,
more programs. So I sort of see that as the upper limit as it is.
I still would like to see 5, because I think that getting those funds into the employees who, that's why we're here, is to be able, thank you for the R&R reminder, the recruitment and retention, because retaining those folks is what we really want to do. We were clear in the Budget and Finance Committee meeting that if we were able to have 5 approved, we recommended that. We didn't know what we had for COLA for the next year. So at least there would be dollars in hands now to January 1 to help with financial situations. And we also believed, as Michelle indicated, that we know that the employees are deserving of that kind of the funds, whatever the increase can be. I don't really want to think, that's a creative way. The splitting it 2.5, 1.5, whatever, twice, and then 1 now at the end of the fiscal year. I would rather see it all done now. I really would prefer to go with the recommendation. I think the numbers support it. I think we have to look at, I know the Bobby and Sandy in particular have been on the board for a long, long time and have seen the real bad times. We've seen good times, and now, but we're in a different situation with, there's a handle on the unfunded pension liability. We've got revenues going up, though we could, we can't just, it's not all rosy, that's for sure. But the projections are good. We have to rely on financial people to give us those kinds of numbers so that we can make a fiscally responsible decision. The recommendation came in, and I'd like to hold with the recommendation. If we approved it tonight, if we were able to do 4, I would prefer 5. I think we can support 5. I don't think we would have an issue with the public in supporting COLA of our employees. The public supports the employees, I think, more than we realize. They see folks out all the time, they interact with the employees, the staff all the time. And I think they understand the value that they bring to the district and how the programs have grown and improved and just all of the wonderful things they were able to do over the past 3 years and going forward. So I'd like to see us hold with recommendation and we can talk about other options if that's
Well, I certainly think we are all saying the same thing. We value our employees, and a COLA of some amount is appropriate. We've had a good year. But that's really not the issue. The issue is the sustainability of the amount. For me, coupled with the little adjustments that we were able to do. To me, it's not just a single digit, it's almost a double digit. And it's it's the sustainable, it's the future. Projections may look great, but I can't go there. I wish I could. So I like what we said, that 3% is $145,000, something like that. Well, that's a little higher than I would feel comfortable with. I don't feel it's irresponsible. Not that whatever gets voted on this evening is irresponsible, but from my perspective of what I believe the district represents, that we are not a top dollar district, never have been. The people who work here love working here, and we understand that. And so it's not to devalue our employees, and it's not to say that they aren't the backbone, and that if we don't pay them well, that we certainly expect them, to flee. That isn't in my experience either. But the obligations of the district and the business of the district, notwithstanding recommendations of our financial experts, my experience just tells me that I need to be more careful.
So we need to 3% of that.
I could see
If that was the resolution.
that may not be where the rest of the board is at. I think that's what I was. So we could take a vote. Who wants to make a motion?
I would like to look at the consistent consensus, of the consensus strong message, come here together. I could be persuaded to do some, that's where you're most comfortable with. I would prefer more. 3% is extra 3,000. It is on top of 5% that we've already given, so that's 8%.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why I very much appreciate conversations that feel like, somebody not on the committee. I mean, you're always going to rely on the input from the folks that were in the meeting. Based on, Secretary Tran, your comments, I shared that stuff. I've swung back the other way, I think in that point, it's like, do it now, do it, and because, and we've had these conversations before where we've looked at staff, we've had these conversations and, it's kind of deja vu all over, but we may not have that goal when it comes around next time, we may not, so, to that extent, I'm leaning more to doing it now, and especially on the comments.
Would you be comfortable in the level?
I'm cool with 5%. I was trying to get to a point where I thought we had consensus. I don't think, based on everybody's opinion, I don't know that we're going to get there tonight. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's been a good discussion that is going to lead to, even further discussion. If they don't, then then that isn't a good thing. But I think that this is going to lead to further discussions on, unfunded pension liability and budgeting, and the need for increased services that'll deliver increased revenue, and what we do about retention, all those things.
I'd like to make a motion.
Please.
I'd like to make a motion that the board authorize a mid-year 5% cost of living adjustment for eligible employees effective January 1, 2023, at an additional cost of $102,487 for fiscal year 22-23.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's a 3-2 vote. With Chair Bernardo and Secretary Trainer voting. Yes. All right, thank you. Very good discussion. Thank you. Really appreciate the time and the insight for everything.
Yes. Yes.
For the record.
For record keeping purposes, because we brought this up in previous discussions, I want to make sure that the minutes reflect that all items are supported, the staff, they COLA, we just differ.
And then make sure that is started.
All right, we'll move on to item number 9. Oh, I'm sorry. Did we have any public comment? I did go through public.
Yeah, we
comment.
went
Never mind.
very good.
Okay. Item number 9, verbal report from committee chairs and opportunities set meeting dates. Looks like TBD across the board here.
TBD for now. Okay, I'm working on I'm contacting a couple of chairs if that's something that here before I leave. So we do have a budget and finance committee meeting set for the budget review in April and May already. So
Get some dates for those.
Yeah, Chair Bernard, those were, that was an item on our committee meeting, was to calendar those meetings, and we went for 3-hour sessions. At the end of April, so that we can get it done and get it to the board.
It's going to have what, 3 readings?
Yes.
July.
June.
Yeah, June. All right, any reports at all, though? I know we're talking about dates here. Any reports or comments from any committee chairs? Very good. Move on to item number 10, board announcements and requests to staff. Bobby, we'll start with you.
I'm looking at the weather for next Saturday, it's looking
Looking
void of rain, but it's gonna be cold, so. And inevitably, since it is the opening day of the rain, it'll, I'm gonna say we're gonna get showers, so hopefully it'll be sunny, right? But yeah, just hope if people can make it, great event, looking forward to it. And then that evening is the Sequoia Elementary Gala. So we'll be at both those events. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. Derek.
Yeah, I'm just happy about where we're at, after today's meeting. They had a lot of great discussions. Looking forward to moving with the potential contract with Larry and pursue the bond measure. I'm also excited about, where we may be after Saturday in terms of, the FX vote. That's one of the, biggest opportunities to see a lot of that revenue coming in for the district, based on, previous years and having, a lot of these classes sell out on the day of. I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of good turnout and, some good performances after this weekend. So, other than that, no other announcements.
Secretary. Okay.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. So one is we all received that EI newsletter, and I just want to make a comment that we appreciate the staff trying to move forward with various different EI efforts. It's trying to make sure it's fun and engaging. So the staff trying things out. There's some comments on ways that engagement can be enhanced in some ways. So hopefully staff can take those into consideration as we move forward. And then summer camp, I have 2 copies just to show you one. So I appreciate staff beefing up.
Heavily marked.
Yeah, well, it will be heavily marked. Beefing up the tech behind that and backup systems to ensure that we can get in and register as they want to. And then the final thing is moving forward that we have approval to move forward with engagement for potential tax measure, I guess. that start engaging more publicly. Myself, I'm trying to do that much more to show that, you know, we are here and we want you to know that we're doing a good job as a district. And so, engagement begins. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Vincent.
One of the fun things I got to do was attended the spirit luncheon with the staff. Last week, it was down at Zachary's, which my favorite pizza place. I attended that. It was a well-attended event. There were several, I think it was at least 15 to 20 people were there. Hadn't seen some of them in a while, so it was good to be able to talk to folks in an informal setting. That was a lot of fun. I'll be dropping by the Camp Expo since I don't have any kids to register anymore and no grandkids yet locally. And I'm looking forward to just seeing how that process goes. So I'll probably wander in about 10 or 10:30 and see how if it's controlled chaos, which I'm sure it'll be fine.
There's a lot of fun at that expo. A lot of stuff set up for kids to do. So I don't know if your daughter's interested, but it sounds like she is. But it's fun just to come to the expo because there's so much.
It's always fun. But she's tagging along with the conference, so we'll be doing it remotely.
The State of the City breakfast is next Tuesday. I hope all of you are signed up. Michelle, will we be at a table or will we be spread out to spread the word about the district?
requested a table, so.
I'm sorry?
I requested a table. I signed up for a table, so, and we had a table plus some, because we have more than 10.
Okay, the staff is coming through.
We have a
staff.
staff members.
Awesome, good. Then to Quee's point, it would be wonderful for the staff to also use the opportunity to mingle through the room. You know, since we're at tables, eventually we'll all, you know, be together, but it would be great to get people to do this. At the PHBA parade last year, Bobby, you were chair, and they sort of had us come up and they paraded us, I guess. You know, we just stood up on the dais and then they dismissed us. Is that all that's happening this year?
I don't know.
Just one of
Yeah.
He was that, yeah.
You have a team that you're working with and
Yeah.
keeping track of.
I mean, there was no presentation.
There's no presentation,
Yeah.
yeah.
Nothing to
There's
prepare for.
They haven't asked for that, so there's nothing for you to.
But it would be good for board members to be there.
Yes.
Because we are invited up and we're visible to the
Yes.
all the kids and the teams and stuff. Yeah. I think, didn't we shout out to you? Yeah, you were standing with
You gave me
you.
a high five when I was walking. Everybody, when they come up, just go to the shed, go to the snack shack.
Section.
Okay.
Yeah,
You'll see it right
There's a big
there.
stage.
Don't go towards the back of the parking lot by the soccer. That's where all. About 2,000 other kids.
Okay. All right. Well, that's it for this evening then. We will adjourn this meeting at 8:37. And thank you all.
Okay.
We're not getting a picture, sir.